Very well. Then touch the darkness within me. Take nourishment from these sovereignless souls.
Stop right there. I love action RPGs. It's my favorite subgenre when it comes to action games. One gameplay mechanic that is synonymous with action RPGs, or just RPGs in general, is leveling up. Now, the idea of increasing the player's stats when they reach a certain experience threshold is not inherently a bad mechanic. Borrowed from tabletop RPGs, leveling up, along with stats, allows the player to customize their character to a certain degree as to promote different playstyles. However, many action RPGs have come to tack on leveling without much effort or thought put into it. Some, for example, give predetermined stat increases each level, instead of letting the player decide which stats to increase. This turns a mechanic initially designed to promote creativity and self-expression into one that acts simply as a time gate. Put enough hours in the game to level up a character enough to finally progress. I want to promote designing equipment as character progression to replace the mechanic of leveling up. What is equipment as character progression? Equipment as character progression means to have increases in stats tied to the equipment worn by the player. Games already use this system to supplement their leveling system, with equipment giving bonus stats to the player. However, we can completely do away with uninspired leveling systems and focus mainly on equipment to strengthen the player. A system like this can be found in the Monster Hunter series of games. How to implement equipment as character progression. The main way would be to have your player's stats tied to the equipment they're wearing. This works best when stats are broken down into categories like attack, defense, magic defense, and not into categories like strength, dexterity, intelligence. We would also have to let the player wear equipment without restriction, as there's limited ways to impose such restrictions. This doesn't mean the player will have access to endgame equipment from the start. We need to properly plan access to each piece of equipment, just as we would have had to plan equipment requirements. Now, why would you have equipment as character progression? Most action RPGs will already have different equipment available to the player. The idea here is to remove two half-baked mechanics and create one fully fleshed out mechanic. This system also allows us as designers to decide the ceiling of how strong a player is at a certain encounter. We can limit what equipment players have access to at which point in the game. The player will then have to focus on their own mastery of the game to progress, since they can't just get stronger by grinding weaker mobs. This lets us put the emphasis on player skill rather than arbitrary levels. Having equipment as progression also allows more flexibility and ease to the player in deciding the difficulty of the game. They can play through the game with the best equipment available or challenge themselves by wearing weaker equipment throughout. On a similar note, this allows the player to try a variety of playstyles simply by wearing different sets of equipment and not having to create a whole new character. But what are the downsides to this system? Since the player themselves has no levels or ways to increase their stats, there isn't much room to create requirements for the equipment. The player is able to wear any piece of equipment as long as they have it. This means introducing pieces of equipment stronger than the current difficulty can cause the game to feel too easy. Though, this is not always a bad thing. Monster Hunter World, for example, leveraged this fact to help players reach the DLC faster when the DLC was released, by introducing the Defender line of weapons, a stronger set of base game weapons. Besides that, this system also has the downside of limiting the player's ability to customize their character's outfit. Having your stats solely tied to your equipment means that fashion will inevitably come second to function. Players will have to forego looking good to become stronger when they find a better piece of equipment. But this problem can be solved by tying the player's outfit to a separate set of armor, a costume menu of sorts where the player can wear previous armors over currently equipped armor. Leveling up is not a bad mechanic to have in your games. However, If you are not going to put much thought into it, you might as well not have it in the game. Designing around your equipment as character progression can be a better alternative to an uninspired leveling system. Tell me your thoughts on the idea of equipment as character progression. Are you for or against it? And how do you feel about the level up system in general? Start a discussion and talk about it in the comments.